Hey everybody, welcome to the new format of the Sana Q&A Mondays. From now on, we're going to be doing it this way. Due to the circumstances that have recently been taking place, I needed to set some new boundaries and create a new format, and I'm very excited to share this with you because we're not going to stop the question and answers. It's just that they're not going to be live anymore. So starting next week, I'm going to create a new page on my website where all of the questions can be submitted. For today, I'm taking some from the Facebook post that I made and from some YouTube comments and whatnot. After this week, I'm no longer going to go through all the comments and everything looking for questions because it's very time consuming and I just don't have time for that. I want to be able to offer, as much as I can to you guys, so I need your help to make it as easy as possible for me to help you. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, once I set up the new format, if you would like to ask a question, you'll be able to go there and submit your question on that page, everything right there, and keep it, to 1 to 2 short paragraphs maximum. If it's anything longer than that, again, I'm simply not going to have time to read that. I'm not going to have time to address it in the Q&As. If you have a longer, more personal question that you'd like to ask, you want a more, you want to ask a lot more about what's going on, have me write you a longer response, I recommend using the personal email support on my website. So starting right now, I'm going to go ahead and read some of the questions that came in. And again, I also want to thank you guys for your patience in this process, of changing the format. Also want to thank you for all of the support. I received a lot of messages and comments from you guys, really, really grateful for your support. So first question isn't exactly a question, it was a comment that someone left on, it was the very first video that I made on YouTube. It said, "Did this happen to you?" And I explained, so it went something like this, right? That's how the relationship with the narcissist went down. So this person wrote, "I only wanted love," right? Didn't we all? Don't we all? Not just those of us who are victims and targets of narcissistic abuse, but I think we pretty much all want love. I think that's what we're all searching for in life. Different people go about that in different ways. And, I went to the seminar this weekend. Trent Shelton was there. I don't know if you know him. He's a public figure. He's got 5 million followers on his Facebook page. If you're not following him and you're really into inspirational stuff, motivational stuff, you want to hear somebody just speak from the heart and speak amazing stuff that's going to touch your heart, I highly recommend checking out his fan page. But he was there at the seminar and he said, "Don't let the hearts who didn't love you keep you from the hearts who do." And that is so true, because if we let that experience from the past, if we let that person from the past stop us from opening our heart again, stop us from ever trusting another person again, stop us from believing in love and having faith that one day we will meet someone amazing who loves us, who respects us, who treats us with that mutual reciprocity of loving and caring. If we give up on that, then we give up. Then nothing happens. Nothing amazing happens when you give up in life, right? So don't give up. Don't give up on love and don't give up on yourself. And it's really important to shift your perspective so you're not stuck in the past, right? Just thinking about all of the failures in love or the failures in relationships or all of those people who hurt you and all of those people who didn't love you, because if that's the story that you're creating and the reality that you're living in, that's everything you're going to be attracting on a daily basis. So you want to rewrite that story. You want to shift your perspective. Okay, that person didn't love you. Maybe many people didn't love you. Maybe you never had a positive example of love in your life. So get out there and find one. And if you don't know a person like that, then find a professional. Find someone who's out there, like an inspirational figure, a motivational figure, and listen to what they have to say so that that spark of faith will start to happen again inside your heart, so that you start to believe in the possibilities versus, in all the failures and the fears and the doubts. You want to shift out of that. So believe in love, because love is possible and love is real and love is the essence of who we are. I truly believe that. I've had so many experiences in this life in non-ordinary states of consciousness, and nowadays I'm able to integrate that into my ordinary states of consciousness, where I can literally feel that everything is love, that I am love, that every molecule of my body is love, that everything that connects us in the space between us and within us is love. That dark matter, that dark energy in the universe, I believe that's the soul of the universe. I believe that's love. And so it's always there because it is who we are. It's just that we have these experiences here in this world, and we get confused because we see things in a certain way where it appears to be a certain way. And in this reality, it is, in this reality, that person really hurt you. You really suffered something, and that was awful, and you didn't deserve that, and that wasn't your fault. But you don't want to give up on the future. You don't want to give up on the love that is the essence of all things, because otherwise you just turn into a negative, pessimistic, unhappy person. And hopefully you don't want to live that way, because that's not really fun. It doesn't sound like a lot of fun. So believe in love, and understand that you're not alone. We all wanted love. And I think that's what everyone wants in this life. It's just that some people go about it in very unhealthy ways. Even as codependents, we got to own, recovering codependents, as recovering codependents, we got to own the fact that we did some unhealthy things in order to seek love. We compromised who we were. We gave up parts of our authenticity and our true self in order to remain connected and attached to that person who loved us, very conditionally, and was able only to manipulate certain things out of us and not truly ever share that deeper human connection, So don't give up. Understand that love is what we all want. And it's very possible. It's real. In fact, love is the most real thing in this world. At least that's what I believe. Someone else wrote, I was divorced this year and finances are tight. My question is in regards to trusting myself. I made friends with a woman in my neighborhood who happens to be a psychotherapist. I'm finding it difficult to chat with her because I sense her nudging me towards trying to reconcile with my narc mother, and I have been no contact only 2 months, still feeling a lot of guilt. I turn to your videos more than any to strengthen my no contact courage. A pep talk today would be awesome. Thank you for all you do. You have helped me tremendously. Okay. So, that's one of the dangers of talking to people. This person is talking about a psychotherapist. It could be your therapist, it could be a friend, it could be a neighbor, it could be a cousin, a sibling, anybody else in your life. If that person is in denial and that person, is giving you advice that is putting you in danger, because any contact that you have with the abuser is triggering the Stockholm Syndrome again. It's reattaching you in that trauma bond, so it's very dangerous. And if a person doesn't understand that, it's okay. It doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad person. It doesn't mean necessarily they're trying to get you hurt. Though keep in mind, that person could be a narcissist who's encouraging you to go back there for more, because they like to watch you suffer and they like to watch you uncomfortable. But let's give this person the benefit of the doubt, and let's say that they truly care about you and they truly love you, but they're just in denial. They just don't get it. They don't really know what a narcissist is. They don't really know what narcissistic abuse is. They don't really understand what trauma bonding is. They don't really understand what PTSD or CPTSD is. They could be giving you very bad advice. So, another thing that I heard this weekend, it's something I've heard over and over again, it's always good to hear it again, is who are you asking advice from? Who are you getting advice from? Be really careful who you're getting advice from. Are people giving you advice who have no idea what you're talking about? And if you're getting advice from people who have no idea what you're talking about, you're asking the wrong people for advice. Don't expect to get good advice from people who just don't get it. Again, it doesn't mean they're necessarily trying to hurt you or they don't love you. They might really love you. They might just not get it. They might just not be the person to provide you with that advice. And that is my advice when you're looking for a therapist, to screen that person. Call them on the phone first or email them, however that works. And, ask what their experience is in working with victims of narcissistic abuse, emotional abuse, PTSD related to abuse. Ask them if they know what Stockholm Syndrome is and trauma bonding. Ask them if they have worked, and have much experience in this realm, or if they have personal experiences in this realm, which is even better, because that's when you know that person truly gets it, because they have been there. You really want to do your homework when you're recruiting a therapist, when you're recruiting any kind of practitioner to help you with any aspect of your life. Just like when you're going to find a doctor, you want to interview that person. Don't just expect that just because they have a title, some letters behind their name and a plaque on the wall that has their degree, that they're going to really be able to understand you and help you. And if that professional, whomever they are, if they're not listening to you and they just don't get you and you don't feel like you're being heard, it's not the right connection. That's not the right person for you. Again, it doesn't mean it's a bad person. It just means that's not the right connection. That person can't really help you because they don't get it. So, if you want to heal something, if you want to accomplish something in life, you got to find somebody who already did it. Somebody who did it, somebody who's been there, somebody who can show you a map out of the woods. That's really important. And stop taking advice from people who just don't get it because they're giving you bad advice. It might have been Trent Shelton actually who said this weekend too, have you ever asked directions from someone who's never been there? What happened? Well, you probably got lost, right? So stop asking directions from people who haven't been there, from people who don't know where there is, right? And, if this is a friend of yours or a family member or someone close to you, maybe with that person, you just don't talk about that stuff anymore. Maybe they're an awesome person in your life for so many other reasons, and you just can't talk about that stuff because they just don't get it, and they're in denial, and they're encouraging you to do something that could be very dangerous for you, which is to have contact with a narcissistic abuser. So keep that in mind, and, understand that it may not be that they have a bad intention. It might just be that they just don't get it, Someone else wrote, I have a question about hoovering. I have been no contact from my Narc parents for 9 months. My grandmother passed away this weekend, and my mother has been contacting my husband and his parents, even after I asked her to leave them out of it the last time I spoke to her 9 months ago. My husband and mother-in-law understands they are supportive of my decision to go no contact because they have noticed some of the covert tactics from my mother. I still feel bad because I feel this is putting them in an awkward position. How do I handle this situation? Also, how do I handle flying monkeys in this situation? I believe my best friend has been converted into a flying monkey. I do not feel comfortable talking to her anymore. Finally, the funeral is Friday, and I was considering sending a floral arrangement to the funeral anonymously. Is this a bad idea? Thank you in advance for your help. First of all, I'm so sorry that your grandmother passed away. I'm so sorry. Grandmothers can be so special. My grandmother was like my soulmate, just so amazing. No other human has ever loved me as unconditionally as my grandmother did. And I truly believe that she was my saving grace. If I hadn't had her in my life, I wouldn't have turned out to be the person I am. I wouldn't know how to love, I don't think. Because when your mother doesn't set you that example, you don't have that example of nurturing, at the foundation of your life. And maybe your grandmother was very special to you. And maybe that's why you want to send, flowers anonymously to the funeral. And if that's what you feel like doing, then do it. Because that's not for your family, that's not for your mom, it's not for anybody else. That's for you. That's between you and your grandma. And if that's important to you, I would say go for it. Also, yes, careful with the flying monkeys. I would have no contact with that person, even if she was your best friend. You need to be willing to walk away from that because that's just dangerous. If that person is in it with your mom or some other, abuser in your life, you need to be very cautious. You need to create space and boundaries with that person. If they're just not getting it, that's not your friend. That's not your friend at all. It doesn't matter who that is. It could be a sibling. It could be a cousin. In this case, you're talking about a friend. But once you realize they've become a flying monkey, you have to immediately put up new boundaries because it's just like being in contact with the abuser. It's like abuse by proxy. They set it up in these very covert, careful, and plotted ways to get you hooked into that. So I would be very, very cautious, and I would set new boundaries with that person. And in terms of the in-laws, yeah, unfortunately, your mom is doing the exact thing that narcissists do in smear campaigns, right? It sounds like your husband and your in-laws are very supportive and understanding, which is awesome, right? Really awesome that you have that support. I would recommend telling them, like, I'm sorry that obviously you feel like you're in the middle of this. Like, I know you must feel that way. And I would recommend that you also go no contact with my mom, that you block her on the phone, on the social media, on whatever, because it's just not safe for you. It's not safe for the situation, and they don't have to feel that responsibility, because likely, your mom is using some guilt tripping and other forms of covert manipulation to hook the in-laws and whatnot, or to try to, and that might feel awkward for them. And so just to take the stress off of everyone, maybe they're almost afraid, to cut her off too. So if I were you, I would just tell them, you have my full permission to block her, so that you don't have to deal with that. You don't have to feel like you're in the middle of anything. I don't want you to be in that position, and I greatly appreciate your support and understanding. Make sure you validate that, because that's no small thing. When you're in the smear campaign, when there are flying monkeys, it's terrifying because you feel so alone, and so often no one sees it and no one gets it, and in your case you do have the support of them, so that's awesome, and I would express your gratitude for that, and let them off the hook. Maybe they're waiting, for you to give them permission in a way, and that way they don't feel like that's their responsibility. Someone else writes, all week I was thinking about him again. So yesterday I did a search, and lo and behold, he opened another Facebook page, this time more braver, with a profile pic. I blocked it, of course, in case he tries to message me. I'm sure he has others, and I know he's on YouTube. I'm not sure how that works, or if I can be found, or channels I subscribe to. I know he has plenty of supply, and I'm sure he just wants to poke me for a reaction. Can you talk a bit about how it works? Like it was as if I knew something was up, and there he was. Is it telepathic? So yeah, a lot of us have experienced this kind of stuff. I mean, the more open and aware you are, psychically, spiritually, the more you might notice this happening, and the more of that connection you're going to feel, because that's your intuition speaking. So one of the most important things to do in the aftermath of abuse is to rebuild your self-trust. And I feel that the best way to do that is to listen to my intuition. Your intuition is your birthright. It's not some hocus pocus woo-woo idea. It is real. It is absolutely real, and it is extremely important. I mean, look at animals, right? Animals don't think, they feel, and they feel intuition. They just know. They know things that we don't know sometimes. Well, the human is also capable of tremendous amounts of intuition, and at a much higher level of consciousness, because we can rationalize it afterwards, right? We can talk about it and articulate it and express it and have access, to all of this consciousness. So, yeah, that's possible. And I would listen to those inklings that you get. Like, when you got that inkling, like you just had this weird inkling that he was out there again, you went out there and you found him and you blocked him. That's awesome. You had immediate validation from the universe. The universe was like, yep, you're right. Here he is. So go ahead and block him, right? So when you get those feelings, and for me, sometimes that comes in the form of like a memory that it just keeps popping into my head, or words that someone said to me that just keep popping into my head. When that happens, instead of getting carried away in that, I step back and I observe that, and I ask myself, okay, so why does this keep coming up? Why does this keep coming up? And is there some connection there? And I like to go investigate that. I don't like to waste a lot of energy ruminating on, well, was it this, or was it that, or was it that? Because then that just like stirs all these fears, and all this anxiety and all these doubt, because if there's all these unknowns, so when you can go investigate something, I would investigate it. If you get this weird feeling that this person is watching you or something, take precautions, don't have very predictable routine kind of thing, and always be looking around you. If you have the feeling, like in this person did, that their ex had created some kind of new social media thing to stalk them, check it out, investigate whatever those inner intuitive feelings are, because it's telling you something. That's your barometer, especially if it's something that just keeps coming to you over and over again. There's something there. Listen to that. And the more that you listen to that, the stronger your self-trust is going to be, because you will get that feedback from the universe. Usually, it comes and you're like, oh my God, that's exactly what I was thinking. Or like, oh my God, that's exactly that feeling I had. Oh my God, that's exactly that dream that I had last night or last week or whatever. So I would listen to that, and I would write them down, because when these intuitive feelings come, sometimes it's not immediately clear in your environment, in your day, and whatever is going on. I would keep, a journal, the journal that you're using for your recovery and for your healing. And I would write that stuff down, because it's going to be really validating. You might go back to that later and suddenly like, oh my God, right? And you see that and you finally get what that was, now that everything's come full circle. Also because you could forget, right? So when the intuition comes, it's another state of awareness. It's not the waking state of awareness usually. So it's very easy to forget. It's very easy to, how many times does that happen, right? Where you had this intuition about something and then you forgot it because you got distracted with a million other things going on in your reality, in your daily life. And then later on you're like, oh my God, remember when I had that intuition and I didn't listen to it, or I just I totally forgot. Why didn't I write that down, right? So write it down. Write it down. That way you don't forget. That way you can go back later. That way it reminds you to follow up on something that came to you that you didn't have time to follow up in the moment, but it's something you wanted to investigate later. And the more you listen to that intuition, the more in alignment with your true self you're going to be, and the stronger your self-trust grows. Because remember, you lost your self-trust in the abusive relationship because you placed your trust in the other person who was deceiving you. Your intuition told you one thing, across the board. People tell me, yeah, I saw the signs. I knew there was something, but I couldn't put my finger on it. So I kept giving them the benefit of the doubt. I kept coming back. I kept staying, I kept whatever, right? How many of us have said that? We knew. So you've got to listen to that intuition. Trust that and the more you listen to that, it's the more validating you're going to be for yourself, versus looking outside of yourself for that approval and that validation. It's much better to give that to yourself. Someone wrote in response to a video, I think that I posted today, I have no idea what my purpose is, nor who I am. I was raised by a narc mom. You're not alone. Even people who weren't raised by narcissists often don't know what their purpose is, because until someone tells you this idea, you're allowed to have purpose in life. What's your purpose? What's your why? That's a Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why. This is written for business, but it's totally applicable for life as well. What is your why? What is that purpose? What is your sense of purpose? Why do you get up in the morning? Why do you do what you do? What would you fight for? What would you die for? That's your purpose. If you don't know yet, you want to do some internal searching. And you want to ask some people in your life, maybe write an email to 5 or 10 people that you know really well, the closest people to you, and ask them, what impact you've had in their lives, what value or impact you've brought to their lives. Why did they like hanging out with you? Why did they like talking to you on the phone? Why did they have you in their life? Because there's 7 billion people in the world, right? And they chose you. Why did they choose you to be one of their people, one of their tribe, one of their inner circle? So reach out and ask them, because sometimes people will give you feedback and see things in you that you couldn't see, or maybe you'll see this feedback and you go, oh my God, yeah, that is me. I do that. And then something comes of that. And when you look at this feedback that you get, and then you reflect on what it is that you love doing, or who it is that you love being, or in what circumstances and situations do you most come alive, that's where you find your purpose. So you want to ask that question. It's not like an immediate reveal. It might take a long time to discover that, but the more you ask yourself this question, and even just starting to ask that question already starts to reveal something, because that shifted things. Like, there was before you asked the question, before the idea of purpose even entered your mind, and then after you asked that question, and suddenly the idea of what is my purpose, who am I, came into your mind. So ask yourself, and understand that it's not just because you're raised by a narcissist that you don't know what your purpose is. It's the state of humanity. It's like everyone is in that state for the most part, unless you were raised by a parent who already went through massive amounts of personal development, and they got you into personal development courses, and they passed on that amazing wisdom and all that inner work that they did and passed it on to you. Then you are really blessed, But you're talking about having been raised by a narc mom. It's much more severe sometimes when the narcissist is the mother, because the mother should be that nurturing, loving figure in your life. And if that figure in your life was putting you down and criticizing you and telling you that you're not good enough, or you're not going to amount to anything, or, just always like trying to sabotage you when you were happy, or when you had something that brought you joy, or when you felt really alive, she just felt the urge to insert some kind of like awful comment right there, or just say something that made you go, and then like you lost all your momentum, you lost your faith, like you lost your in touchness with who you are, right? So it's not your mom's fault. Understand that, and I don't mean that it's not her fault. The abuse was her fault. Yes, that was her fault. It's not your mom's fault that you don't know your purpose. Your mom may have added to that tremendously, but understand that we're all in this boat. Like, everyone is in this boat. Like, what is our purpose, right? So ask that question. Start to look deeper. Do you have a religious life? Do you have spiritual beliefs? Do you have a higher power that you pray to? Like, those are really important things to have in your life when you want to take your life to the next level, because that's where massive transformation happens. And I really recommend looking deeply into yourself and asking those deeper questions and allowing it to be revealed to yourself. And then go ahead and get some feedback from the people who really love and support you in your life, and ask them what impact you had in their lives. Don't ask a narcissist that. I don't recommend that at all. But the people who are truly loving and respectful and caring in your life. I mean, maybe you don't have a lot of these people in your inner circle or in your tribe, but maybe at work people appreciate you. Maybe you're not really friends with them or anything, so ask them maybe, say, I'm doing some personal development work and I was just really curious, what impact do I bring to the work? What impact do I bring to this company? What impact do I bring to our team? What is it that you value and see in me? And see what the responses are, because I guarantee you're going to find some kind of spark of something in there, and you're definitely going to see something in there that you hadn't seen in yourself before. Someone asks, what do you think of an abuser who at the same time does almost masochistic sacrifices, not just like little kindnesses causing Stockholm Syndrome, but an intense, exaggerated sacrifice? So it sounds like you found yourself a very covert narcissist or a sociopath or a borderline, because they tend to be this kind of, seemingly self-sacrificing, self-effacing, masochistic kind of person. I would look up the waif borderline personality. There's an article on Psychology Today where it talks about the 4 different types of borderline personalities, a borderline personality disorder, the 4 different archetypes, right, of them. And one of them is called the waif, W-A-I-F, and that is the martyr. That's the person who gets narcissistic supply in the form of pity. That's the person who is entitled in the form of being a victim. I'm entitled to what I want because I'm a victim. Feel bad for me, give me what I want, right? That's this person. They're manipulating you by doing those masochistic sacrifices, right? They're manipulating you emotionally somehow. It's emotional blackmail, right? So, recognize that that is a form of emotional abuse. First of all, I know it's really tricky when that person appears to be the victim, but recognize they're getting off on playing that role. That role is serving them. That's how they're manipulating people, by playing, oh, poor me, don't you want to help me, kind of thing. Feel bad for me. The world owes me because it's so hard to be me, right? Very narcissistic, but tends to be more the borderlines, or could be a covert narcissist. Typically, the covert narcissists don't go to that extreme. It's usually more the borderline personalities, but the more covert narcissists also will use those martyr victim, sorts of pictures that they like to paint about themselves in order to manipulate you. So, yeah, you're still in the Stockholm Syndrome either way, even if that person isn't like aggressive and outward and seemingly obviously taking advantage of you. Recognize that that is a form of abuse, when a person plays the victim in order for you to give them what they want. Someone asks, how come that my father is blind to what's happening around him? I tried to talk to him once about it, and he said he was happy with his life. I suspect that my mother has narcissistic traits, and if my father was codependent, then he wouldn't be happy in the relationship, would he? Does this mean that he is more narcissistic than codependent? It could be that your father is a severe codependent because he's just trying to make it work. He's in denial, and he's totally hopelessly dependent on your mother. It sounds like, your mother has the narcissistic traits. So, that's the thing. And that's like Ross Rosenberg describes in his book, The Human Magnet Syndrome, how the relationship changes when the codependent gets healthy. So when the codependent starts to change themselves, meaning the codependent starts to set new boundaries and starts to express their true self, their needs, their wants, their emotions, their views and perceptions of reality, their opinions, right? That's when things start to change, because that's when things get uncomfortable. The relationship between the narcissist and the codependent is a perfect, symbiotic relationship where they're serving each other. Recognize that if you played that codependent role in a relationship or many relationships, that's where you were. You were locked into that. Something there was serving you because your unhealthy patterns were resonating with the opposite unhealthy patterns that were a perfect match. You happen to have what they wanted. They happen to have what you thought you wanted, right? And that's what happened. You started to get healthy. You started to realize, hey, this isn't working. Hey, I need some new boundaries. Hey, if I actually express myself and my needs and who I am, then, I get abused by this person or put down by this person. Yeah, wake up call, right? So it sounds like your dad hasn't had that wake up call. It could be that your dad never has that wake up call. It could be that he's so comfortably numb in his age and in the long relationship that has gone on that he will never wake up from that. It's very possible. Very, very possible. Just like any other codependent who stays, in the relationship, because they just would rather stay in denial than face the truth, because the truth means you have to do something about it. Like once you realize you can't stay there, it becomes extremely unstable. Once you have that awareness, everything starts to fall apart. Everything starts to shift already. It becomes more and more uncomfortable, but it sounds like your dad is still in the comfortable numbness. And, it's unfortunate, but you also have to recognize that you have no control over that. There's nothing you can do to wake him up other than to live by your example. You be who you are, live through your example. And if he happens to see that in you and see the mirror in himself and wake himself up, and make different choices, that's awesome. But if he doesn't, it doesn't mean that you failed. And you don't want to invest all of yourself in trying to control him to help him wake up, right? Because that's the same mess you were in with the narcissist, in your life. I'm guessing you had a narcissist in your life if you're writing on here, right? Where you were in that role, right? You were trying to control the other person by helping fix them or helping change them, or just hoping and praying that one day they would change themselves, and you just stuck around thinking about the good times and hoping that he would change or she would change into who he or she was when the times were good, or in those moments when, they seemed to be good to you. So, and the other thing is your father could also have narcissistic fleas. That's something that happens. If you sleep with dogs, you will get fleas, right? That's the expression. And when you hang out with narcissists, especially over a long period of time, you could start to develop some of their habits. You know, once you start to step away from that, it's like, whoa, this isn't me. You know, that was me in that relationship trying to figure out how to survive, you know, and that was that person wearing off on me. But once you get away from that, you recognize you want to start getting rid of those fleas. You know, you got to put those little drops in the back of you, just like you put on your dog. And those are boundaries. And that is radical self-examination. You know, that's looking at yourself and your own habits and recognizing what habits you have that are not healthy, that you need to change, you know, that you might have absorbed from the narcissist. Could be your dad has absorbed some of those characteristics. It could also be that your dad defends your mom so much that it appears he's also narcissistic. But remember, your dad is hopelessly dependent on that. And remember, in the Matrix movie, Morpheus tells Neo, you know, you have to look at everyone around you who's in the Matrix as an enemy, because they are so hopelessly dependent on the system, they will defend it. That's the codependent who's in denial. Okay, they're so hopelessly dependent on the narcissist that they will defend the narcissist. They will enable and defend the narcissist. So keep that in mind, you know, when you're dealing with your father. Someone asks, what is the relation between the trauma bonding, cognitive dissonance, and gaslighting? So, okay, these are 3 different things. And yes, it's all layered and connected. So, okay, where to start? So gaslighting, right? Gaslighting is an aggressive form of manipulating another person's perception of reality. Gaslighting is when you know something happened and you confront a person about what happened, whether it just happened or it happened a long time ago, and the person says, no, that didn't happen. I don't remember that. No, you're remembering that wrong. Oh, you're just hypersensitive. I didn't mean it that way. You know I didn't mean it that way. I was just joking, babe. You know, these sorts of excuses that they're making, that's gaslighting, right? So gaslighting is a form of lying. It's essentially lying, but it's a way of manipulating your perception of reality. It is very, very dangerous because you lose sense of reality, right? You have got to take responsibility for your reality. So, you know, gaslighting, in order to override that, is you just have to start trusting your perceptions of reality. I know it's really difficult when the person in front of you, when your partner, your boss, your coworker, your sibling, your parent, whomever in your life is doing this, and you're like really doubting yourself, right? You're like, well, but... And you're like, the plausible deniability. It could be, maybe they were just joking. Maybe they really didn't mean it that way. But when you see a pattern, right? And I'm not talking about this happened one time. If it happened one time, it was one time. When you see the pattern of this happening, that's real. That's when you got to understand you're being played. And you got to stop buying into that. You got to stop accepting the excuses, because when you accept the excuse for that gaslighting, you are enabling the abuse. And, you know, the narcissist tends to do this early on in the relationship. There's a wonderful YouTube channel with lots of information. It's called Be Good 4000. And James really goes into this. He created a couple videos called the doo-doo test, or the narcissist doo-doo test. And there's like part 1 and part 2. Highly recommended to watch that. He will explain to you how the narcissist will do this to you early on in the relationship. Now, the borderline will do this in different ways. The psychopath and sociopath will do this too. And they'll pretend like, you know, nothing happened and that it was just you, right? And they'll test your reaction. And so they're testing, are you going to trust yourself, or are you going to second guess yourself and believe them? You know, and they are counting on the fact that your conscience works, that you have an actual working conscience. So, you know, your conscience is going to doubt yourself, because you're like, well, you know, and so you're considering the other person's point of view. And it's good to consider other people's point of view. But it's also really good to listen to your intuition. And when that bullshit meter is going off, listen to the bullshit meter. The bullshit meter is telling you that you're being played, even if you have no proof of that. You know, if you get the feeling, trust that. So you really want to start to understand how your body and your intuition communicate to you when someone is lying and manipulating your perception of reality. Maybe you get this sinking feeling in your gut, maybe you even feel like suddenly you have to go to the bathroom, maybe your heart starts to flutter and things just feel uncomfortable and weird inside your chest, right? Maybe you start to like tremble in your body and you get nervous. You're feeling like the fight or flight syndrome, right? Like that fight or flight thing is telling you you're in danger. There's something there that's causing you anxiety. Something's not right. Maybe all you feel is just this inkling of, man, something just ain't right here. Listen to that. Every time you get that, man, something just isn't right. Listen to that. Listen to that always. So that's gaslighting. The trauma bonding happens when you are with an abusive person. That's also called Stockholm Syndrome. That takes place when you fear for your life. You feel like there's no way out. You feel trapped with this abusive person who's holding you captive, right? Literally, like in this relationship, they're holding you in this dynamic. Now, of course, you have the ability to leave at any moment, but when you're locked into that trauma bond, your perception tells you there's no escape. Your perception tells you there's no way out. Your perception tells you you have to stay. And then your mind will make up all these reasons why, right? It just fills in all the blanks. And so you stay. And the trauma bond, the Stockholm Syndrome, only works when that person doses you with drops of kindness. Could be something like, they know they want to get something from you, so they make your favorite dinner or they buy your favorite wine, and then the abuse comes right after that because you've now opened yourself and softened. Maybe it's some kind of flattery compliment that they give you, and they know that that's going to open your heart, and then you're going to start to place your approval and sense of validation in that person, and then later that's when they come in and zing you, right? So, be very cautious when you're in an abusive relationship. When that person is being kind to you, that kindness is a form of manipulation. That kindness is for an end goal of getting you to do something that they want you to do. Be very concerned when you see that person being kind. I know, it's like the cognitive dissonance of it, right? That's the next thing we're going to go to. The cognitive dissonance is like, what doesn't make sense? Like, okay, your brain tells you, okay, this person is abusive and manipulative and they did all these things, but then they just did this kind thing. Or they did all these other kind things, but then they're also like this. And so your brain is going, but they're like this, and then they're like this, but they're like this. And it's like, zzz, and it creates like this short circuit inside your brain, which like fries your brain. It fries your mind. It's what causes the confusion and what's called the brain fog that happens from abuse. That's what's happening. It's the cognitive dissonance. It's trying to hold two completely contradictory points of view or ideas or opinions or perceptions of reality within your mind. It's very confusing that way, and that's when you slide into that brain fog because you have no clarity. You don't know what's real. Is it this? Is it this? What is it? And the danger is to get caught up in those moments of kindness or to keep staying for like the carrot stick of kindness, or to keep staying thinking about early on in the relationship when things were good, when they were expressing this kindness on an everyday or frequent basis, and before that stopped, that pattern, the idealization, love bombing pattern stopped, and then you moved into the devaluation phase, and then it was the intermittent kindness. And recognize that that's a very powerful form of psychological manipulation, so all of these terms are related: the trauma bonding and Stockholm Syndrome, the cognitive dissonance, and the gaslighting. And this is all of these are part of what's called crazy making. Like, it makes you feel like you're going crazy. That's why like almost every single person coming out of these relationships says, I feel like I'm going crazy. Am I crazy? Like, all this happened, is it me? Until they get that feedback from someone who gets it and someone who validates their perception of things, it's just so confusing, and you can really feel like you're the one who's crazy. You're not crazy. It's just that you have been through abuse training. It is a form of psychological conditioning and training. They have groomed you. They have trained you to react in certain ways to their abuse in order to fulfill their needs, in order to give them whatever it is that they want. And they utilize these tools. Someone says, I've been through 3 of these relationships, and after the most recent and most traumatic, I finally started to work out what's been going on. I've read Psychopath free, and it really did change my outlook. I finally understand what's happening. The problem is that I can't work out what's wrong with me. Why have I fallen for these 3 kinds of problematic people? That's the root of this. I've allowed it to happen. I'm in counseling now, and I'm reading a book on CPTSD. I'm sick of being walked on. I'm tired of being abused. So that's awesome that you are starting to take matters into your hands. You are taking the reins of control over your destiny in your hands. You are sick and tired of being sick and tired, and now you're doing something about it. Awesome. Good job. Good job reading and starting to educate yourself and looking into what in me is causing this to happen, right? You have now moved beyond the victimhood state, because the victimhood stage is when it's all the other person's fault, right? Just all this blame and all the responsibility is put out yourself and outside of yourself. And in one realm of reality, that is true, right? In one dimension, it is true. That person abused you. That person hurt you. It was their fault. Now, that's if you want to stay in that victim consciousness. When you move into the survivor consciousness, that's where this person is at right now. This person is recognizing they have control over themselves. They have to take responsibility for their own reality. You got to own your reality. If you're not happy in your reality, you got to do something about it. Stop blaming the people around you. Stop allowing that to be your excuse for not changing things, right? You got to own the responsibility of that. So it's awesome that you're doing that, which means you're already into that healing stage of recognizing what in me is attracting this. What is my part in this? Because you enable it, right? We all did. That's what the codependent does. It's the only way that relationship works is if we enable that behavior. Enabling, as Dr. George Simon explained it in the interview that I did with him a few months ago, is buying the excuse. It's that simple. It's that simple. How we enable the abuser is when we buy their excuse, when we accept their excuse, when we believe their excuse, right? So that's what it was. And so where does that come from? That comes from a lack of self-trust. It comes from a lack of self-love. It comes from a lack of self-respect. Recognize you learned that somewhere. Maybe this is a pattern that's been with you all your life. Maybe you grew up in a family where this was the pattern. One of your primary caretakers was one of these manipulative characters. Maybe something different happened in your childhood. Maybe there was alcoholism. Maybe there was an addiction. Maybe it was just like an absentee parent, right? That started to create some kind of doubt in yourself, and you started to place your sense of approval and validation in someone else outside of yourself. Something happened early on. So the core, what you really want to get at in the healing path is your inner child wound. That's really where you want to go. And I recommend getting John Bradshaw's book, Homecoming. I recommend checking out his videos on YouTube because he really goes into the inner child wounds. He goes into the developmental stages of childhood and the particular wounds that can happen in each of those stages. If you had a narcissistic parent or someone on that cluster B personality disorder, if one of your parents was one of those, I really recommend starting with the infant state, because that's where it really began. That's where like the major wounds started, and then it probably got repeated over and over again. So how do you get there? I recommend getting that book. I'm also making my own inner child integration training program for you guys that will be ready hopefully within the next month. But until then, start asking yourself that question, like, so what was the role that you played? I think you mentioned 3 relationships, right? What was the role that you played in those relationships with those toxic people? Who were you? Were you the fixer, the caretaker, the savior, that kind of thing? What was your role, right? And then how did that role make you feel? Like, why were you doing that role? Is because of something that you felt. And the bottom line is usually, doing that role, whatever that was, made you feel like you matter to someone. you know? And why? Because you probably learned that growing up as a child, that if you played that role, then you mattered. You mattered to the family system, you mattered to your narcissistic or, you know, alcoholic or addict parent. You mattered if you fulfilled that role. You were important if you fulfilled that role. And it's very sad, but that's what happens, and you can override that, you can heal that. So I recommend looking back in your series of relationships, maybe even in your friendships, maybe even at work, you notice this pattern follows you, that you tend to play that role, right? Because you're getting something out of that too. I'll admit it, you know, I got something out of that. I felt like I mattered when I was caretaking an abusive person. You know, it's sad, it's sick. I didn't know, I didn't get it at the time, right? But I get it now. And I'm doing the work now to heal the inner child wounds. So that's what you want to get to, are those inner child wounds. And again, John Bradshaw, fantastic information on that. Also, tons of information on YouTube that you can get. Okay, someone asks, what's the difference between being narcissistic and having a high self-esteem? Who are you or someone else to judge how someone views themselves? Okay, so sensing a little bit of bitterness behind this, and I'm not entirely certain what the intention of this person was, but I'm going to answer this anyways because it's a great question. That first question especially, what's the difference between being narcissistic and having a high self-esteem? I think that the mainstream media has done a massive disservice to us by utilizing this term narcissistic and implying that narcissistic simply means you have a very high degree of self-love. That's not true. Narcissists don't love themselves at all. They have a deep inner pit of shame and insecurity. That's what motivates them to do what they do. Okay, they don't have self-love. Narcissism is not equivalent to self-love. Very, very different things. Self-esteem, you know, this sometimes you also see this in the media. They'll call it self-confidence or self-esteem. Very different things. Again, so narcissism is a self-absorption. That's what that is. It's just me, 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 me. It's all about me, right? Narcissistic person is the one who's so completely absorbed in themselves, they don't have any time and energy for you or anybody else, to care about you or anybody else. And the only reason they have interactions with people is for that narcissistic supply that they're trying to get. It's a transaction, you know, they want the supply, they want that person to do something or to be something for them, and they get supply from that. They use people, they objectify people to get that, whether they admit it or not, you know. So being narcissistic means a person is self-absorbed. They are unable to put themselves in your shoes. They don't have empathy for you. They just don't. All they feel is about themselves. You know, if you don't do what they want, they're just going to complain that you didn't do what they want, you know, and that something's wrong with you for not doing what they want. Having a high self-esteem is what helps you to recognize who's the narcissist, you know? So if you are a codependent, you recognize you have a very low self-esteem. I believe that narcissists also have a very low self-esteem. That's why they behave they do, because hurt people, you know, and that's their thing. They feel so deeply insecure and ashamed of who they are that they have to hurt other people or take advantage of other people to feel good about themselves. So it is not at all the same as self-esteem. I believe self-esteem is the sense that we feel when we have an interaction and feedback with the universe. So in other words, we go out in the world and we be ourselves and we do whatever it is that we do. That feedback that we get from the universe determines our self-esteem. So if we're interacting with the universe and we feel powerless and helpless and we feel like nothing ever works out and I try so hard and all that happens is I meet deceitful people and people that hurt me and situations that disappoint me, well, we have a very low self-esteem because the feedback you're getting from the universe is very low, right? When your self-esteem is higher, the feedback that you're getting from the universe is much better. It's like you try to do something and things work out. You know, you create some action, you get a positive reaction from the universe. That's when you know that your self-esteem is raising. and how do you work on that is by taking the reins of your destiny, is by taking 100% self-responsibility. It's stop blaming everything outside yourself. Stop blaming other people for your reality. Stop blaming other people for your life situation. Yeah, shit happened, and yeah, that stuff was awful, and yeah, you went through some really painful experiences and you really struggled. I get that, right? But when you want to stop struggling, when you want to stop suffering, that's a decision that you make, to take 100% responsibility for your life, to take responsibility for your actions, to take responsibility for your perspective, because that is all you have control over, and it is everything that you have control over. So definitely not the same thing. Narcissism is not self-love. Narcissism is not high self-esteem. Just for fun's sake, I'm going to entertain this question. Who are you or someone else to judge how someone views themselves? Okay, if you're not discerning the people that you're with and how you feel when you're with people, then you're in danger. You need to be discerning. Now, I would make a distinction between the word discernment and judgment. Okay, because sometimes people see this word judgment and they're like, well, don't judge people, it's wrong to judge people. And sometimes you'll find people utilize this in spiritual abuse and religious abuse. So be very careful when you hear people saying this. It could be a narcissist or a psychopath or borderline trying to convince you, not to consider them a negative person, not to consider them a narcissist, not to consider them an abusive person in your life. Who was it? Iñaki Piñuel, I think. He's a psychotherapist or psychiatrist. Oops, my dog just scared herself. From Barcelona. And he talks about the importance of placing the label on the manipulative person. And it is a judgment, and it's something that you have to do in order to recognize who you're dealing with. So you got to know who you're dealing with, and understand that when you recognize these signs of covert manipulation and aggression, which is the abuse that's taking place. When you see that happening, it is important to discern that is unhealthy for me. I need to have a boundary here. I do not want that in my life. And it is important to place that judgment on that person so that your brain understands this is a dangerous person. Because if you don't, you're going to stay stuck in that Stockholm Syndrome and in the trauma bond. So you have to recognize that. You have to recognize you're dealing with a manipulative, dangerous person who is going to bring inevitable harm into your life. Who are you to do that? Who are you not to do that? Because if you're not doing that, you're placing yourself in danger. If you have come from these codependency patterns all your life, where you tend to attract people like that, and you tend to attract people who abuse that and try to twist your mind and think, who are you to judge them for who they are, who you think they are? It doesn't matter. Okay, if you get that intuition, you're like, this person is not healthy for me, this person is dangerous for me, this person is toxic for my life, then you go ahead and set that boundary and keep that person out your life. Okay, you don't owe them anything. You don't owe anybody anything. And if a person is trying to convince you that you owe them, the privilege of being in your life, they are mistaken, because being in your life is a privilege. And the sooner you recognize that and honor that and respect that, the better. Right? Because then you're going to be a lot more discerning in who you let into your life. Be very careful who you let into your life, because especially those people who are the closest to you, they say in business, this has been carried on and on and on. I don't even know who started this saying, but it is absolutely 100% true. Like the 5 or so people that you most surround yourself with, or you spend the most time and energy investment with, you will become like them. You will become like them. So be very discerning who you let into your life, because you will become like them. So ask yourself, who are those people? Name them, write it down. Write down the list of those people who are in your life, and ask yourself, what do you admire about those people? What do you appreciate about those people? What impact do those people have in your life? And if you can't come up with positive things, and if the positives aren't massively outweighing the negatives, you better really rethink who you're allowing into your life. And maybe it's time to set new boundaries. Okay, I think someone wrote this in response to that very first video that I wrote, did this happen to you, when I was laying out, the typical patterns of the narcissistic abusive relationship. This person wrote, wow, this was exactly my relationship with my ex in a nutshell, word for word. It's such a sick feeling. I feel like I'm recovering from an illness, not a breakup. And wow, isn't that true, right? Because this is not a normal breakup. It's not the kind of breakup you have with any other kind of person, and that's the bottom line. Is when you're dealing with a person on the cluster B personality disorder spectrum, you're dealing with someone where the traditional rules do not apply. Dr. George Simon talks about how traditional psychotherapy, the Freudian psychoanalysis, the Freudian traditional psychotherapy does not apply to these abusive people because their conscience does not work like the rest of us. They know the difference between right and wrong. They're not crazy. Crazy, as they define it in psychology, is not knowing the difference between right and wrong. They know the difference between right and wrong, and they choose wrong anyways. I asked Dr. Simon, why did they do it? Dr. Simon said, because it works. Because they do it and they get away with it. Because people enable it. People accept the excuse. So they keep doing it, right? So, when you're recovering from a breakup with a narcissist or another manipulative person on that spectrum, yeah, it's like recovering from a really severe illness. A severe psychological illness, like it could be a physiological thing. It could be that it got to the point that you developed fibromyalgia, ulcers, asthma, any kind of autoimmune problem. It could even be cancer. This person negative people, toxic people can really destroy your life. People pleasing can set you up for chronic illness. It will eventually kill you. Keeping people pleasing, putting other people's needs in front of yours. You have to put your oxygen mask on first, right? So yes, it is like recovering from so much more than a breakup, which is why if you try to talk to people like your friends or your relatives who have never gone through this and they're like, oh, come on, just get over it already. It's been 2 months since you broke up. I was over my ex a long time ago. It's not the same situation. It's just not the same. And there is so much more involved. There is the PTSD involved. Like that's the so-called illness that we all developed. It could be PTSD, it could be CPTSD. The way they describe CPTSD is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. That's when you are in a situation of ongoing trauma. So if you are in a relationship, that is ongoing trauma. It's an abusive relationship. It's ongoing trauma. It went on over a period of time, a long period of time. So things got accumulated, things exacerbated. What if you went from one abusive relationship to another to another? Maybe you were raised your whole life like that. Maybe one of your caretakers was one of these characters. You have a severe case of CPTSD, quite likely. Which is why it's really important to find a therapist near you who understands that, who really gets it, who can help you heal from that. Check out Pete Walker, his work on CPTSD. If you don't know who he is, check out his website. He has phenomenal information on that. If you can't find a therapist who understands this, and the therapist doesn't have any empathy for you, and they're just like judging you, for how you feel about that, maybe you need a different therapist, and I really recommend educating yourself as much as possible. There is so much information on the internet now. So many people are putting out information about this particular thing, and sometimes like we just don't have people in our personal life who get it, who can help us. Maybe you can't find the right professionals to get on board. Maybe, you're a self-starter and you're a really independent learner. So you buy a bunch of books and you educate yourself as much as possible, until you can get some outside help. It's really helpful to get outside help because it's like you can't do this alone. And if you don't have a support network of people in your life who get it, who support you, who are encouraging you, then you need to find someone else. You need to find a support group out, some new support group. Could be a 12-step group, could be some kind of, spiritual or religious group, could be a professional that you get on board. Still be very discerning of the people in those groups, of the professionals that you hire, of your friends, and could be your so-called friends that you confide in. Always be discerning about that. Are these people really supporting you, or are they not supporting you? Are they pretending to be concerned, but they're actually putting you down in very twisted and sick and covert ways because they enjoy watching you suffer? So be very cautious about that, and keep in mind that in plenty of 12-step groups and religious institutions and spiritual communities, there could be narcissists, there could be psychopaths, there could be sociopaths, there could be borderlines, they could be everywhere. So keep that in mind and understand who you're dealing with. There could be plenty of other wonderful people to meet there. So don't completely close yourself off from possibilities. Explore things. Trust your intuition. Does this feel good? Does this not feel good? That's your intuition. That is the simplest form of explaining your intuition and how your intuition talks to you. If you feel good, it's something that's okay for you. If you don't feel good, something's not right. That's your intuition telling you something's not right. You got to change something. Maybe you got to get out of that situation. Maybe you got to set up a new boundary with another person in your life. And have patience with yourself. Have patience with yourself too, because it's really easy to get trapped in the self-judgments, in that negative self-talk, and I've been there, I'd be like, come on, get over it, blah, blah, blah. That voice that was inside my head, that was my mother's voice, who was literally saying those words to me the last time I had the PTSD crash, And so you want to eradicate that negative self-talk, because that's just going to keep you stuck, in self-pity and feeling bad for yourself. And it's going to stop you from moving forward in life, and understand it takes time. It's not an overnight thing. You might have massive breakthroughs overnight, but it's still a journey and it's still a process, and depending on what you went through and how long you've been going through it, it could be a lifetime process. Things get better and better and better, especially after the biggest stuff is cleared, out of your way. But I truly believe it's something that could always be with us, to some way. And I think that the trick is to transmute that suffering and that pain into a gift, into some kind of treasure that we can take forward. Instead of allowing the abuse and the pain and the suffering to use you, use it for something better. Transmute that into a sense of passion and purpose that leads you forward, that leads you into joy, that leads you into contributing something to other people, that makes you feel like you're alive, that makes you feel like when you leave this earth, you are leaving some kind of positive legacy behind you. Someone else asked, lately I have really been wanting to reach out to my ex-Narc's parents just to let them know how I feel about everything that transpired, because they had a part in something financially. I know they say no contact, and I have not had contact since I left 9 months ago, but I fixate on these things. I'd like to say them, and I go back and forth and feel like I can't move forward and really want to. What's your advice? So here's the thing, generally it's best just to cut off entirely from the ex-Narc's whole tribe, the family, the friends, everything, because they're probably, in it. They're probably the flying monkeys with the narcissist. They're probably not going to understand. They're probably not going to have empathy for you. They're probably going to tell the narcissist, and then he or she is possibly going to try to get under your skin again and contact you again. It could just be that they say something awful to you and you're just like, after what they said, and then you feel worse about yourself. All of those things are possible and very probable. It is possible there's a small percentage that they get it, that they see it. Probably not, but they might, maybe. If you absolutely feel like you absolutely need to speak your truth in order just to get that out and to speak your voice, and that is an important part of your healing, no matter what they say, then that's okay. As long as you walk in there knowing that you have no expectations of what they're going to come at to you. No matter what they say, no matter what their reaction is, it doesn't matter for you. The whole point is speaking your voice. It's opening your throat chakra, right? Speaking your truth, the self-expression, your willpower. If that's all it is for you and you're completely prepared to tune out anything that comes back to you that could be negative, any kind of repercussion that they try to throw your way, as long as you're okay with that and you're prepared for that and you have no expectations, then it could be safe for you to do that, as long as you know the probability of what's going to happen. And if you feel like you have to do that for your healing, then do it. But make sure you have your boundaries in place, and make sure what you'll need to do if they react in that way. Understand that could open you to some kind of, them trying to seek revenge or retribution or attack you for this or that. Understand that's all very possible, by taking that path. But you got to trust your intuition first. So if your intuition is telling you got to do this to be free, then do that to be free. And no matter what they say, make sure that that's out there, and and you've given yourself the approval. You've given yourself the validation. You've given yourself that 100%, I know what my reality is. I'm not going to get confused with any gaslighting or anybody trying to confuse me in any other way, shape, or form about what happened. As long as you're solid in that, then it's okay to step in there, because then the risk isn't as high, but understand that it's probably going to trigger a lot of things, and if you do it, I would do it in a period of time where, for like the next 3 days or so, you've got some extra time built in that you can spend on self-care and recovery, because you're probably going to need it. You're probably really going to need to go back and deal with those feelings and stuff. And maybe for you, this is what you need to do in order to trigger and bring up all these old feelings. Because remember, we have to feel it to heal it. We have to trigger it, or somebody else triggers it in us in order for it to come up. And then suddenly we're angry. We're like, why am I angry? Well, I'm angry about that thing that happened a long time ago, right? And it could be that in that interaction, when you try to tell them about that thing, that it triggers a lot of your old feelings that then you need to process. And maybe that's part of your process, so that you can be free from those emotions. So be patient with yourself and give yourself that time for some radical self-care after taking that step, and totally understand the realm of where you're stepping in and what you could be getting yourself into. That way, you're not naive, and that way you don't walk in there unprotected. So I think that's all the questions that I was able to gather up for today. So again, thank you so much for your patience in this process as we're changing formats for the Q&As. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for all your support, all of you who have reached out with comments and messages, telling me that, you get it and you're there for me. And, especially those of you who said that you recognize that I'm leading by example, that I am setting new boundaries with the toxic person. And this is, one of those things that I have to do in order to protect myself and to create a safe and healthy environment for all of us to be together. So this is what will be going on from now on. I'll be posting these recordings every Monday. I will be creating a new thing on my website where you'll be able to post your questions for me to read in the Q&As. And again, if you have a more personal question or you would like more in-depth work, check out my website. I offer several different services, my coaching via Skype and email, anywhere in the world, doesn't matter where you live. We can work that out. So I'm sending you all a big hug, and I will see you soon.